Document. Part 1. The jungle was alive, with sounds chirping insects, rustling leaves, and the distant call of an unknown creature. Jason Carter wiped sweat from his forehead as he tightened a bolt on the engine of his transport vehicle. It wasn't glamorous work, but it paid well enough to keep him moving from one planet to another. He liked the solitude of it, the quiet rhythm of fixing things that were broken. Most days, he didn't even see another person unless it was someone passing through or hiring him for repairs. Today, though, something felt different. The air seemed heavier than usual, charged with electricity. Jason glanced up at the sky, where dark clouds gathered ominously. A storm was coming, and soon. He cursed under his breath and reached for his toolkit, determined to finish the job before the rain hit. But just as he leaned over the engine again, a deafening roar split the silence. Jason froze, his hand hovering over the wrench. That sound wasn't thunder, it was too sharp, too mechanical. His eyes scanned the horizon, searching for the source. Then he saw it, a streak of fire, cutting across the sky, trailing smoke behind it, like a comet. Whatever it was going down fast. Without thinking, Jason grabbed his emergency pack and ran toward the crash site. The jungle was dense, its thick vines and towering trees making every step a challenge. Branches slapped at his face, and the ground beneath his boots was slick with mud. Still, he pushed forward, driven by instinct more than anything else. Someone could be hurt or worse. It took nearly 20 minutes to reach the wreckage, and, when he did, the sight made his stomach churn. The shuttle was little more than a charred husk, its metal frame twisted and smoking. Pieces of debris littered the area, some still glowing faintly from the heat. Jason hesitated only for a moment, before stepping closer, calling out to see if anyone had survived. "Hello, is anyone there?" At first, there was no response, just a crackle of flames eating away at what remained of the craft. But then, a faint whimper caught his attention. Following the sound, Jason moved around the wreckage until he found a small figure huddled beneath a piece of fallen metal. It was a girl, no older than 8, her face streaked with dirt and tears. She clutched a stuffed animal tightly to her chest, her wide eyes filled with fear. "It's okay," Jason said softly, crouching down so he wouldn't tower over her. "I'm here to help." The girl didn't respond, but she didn't pull away either. Carefully, Jason lifted the metal shard off her legs and scooped her into his arms. She was lighter than he expected, fragile almost, and he couldn't help but notice the faint bruising on her arms. Whoever she was, she'd been through something awful. As he turned to leave, a voice stopped him in his tracks. "Wait." Jason spun around, his heart pounding. Standing a few feet away was a woman, her clothes torn and her hair matted with ash. Her face was pale, but her green eyes burned with determination. She looked exhausted, yet there was a fierceness about her that demanded respect. "My daughter," the woman said, her voice trembling but firm. Is she alive?" "She's fine," Jason replied quickly, shifting the girl slightly so the woman could see. "She's scared, but she'll be okay." Relief washed over the woman's face, and for a moment, she looked like she might collapse. Instead, she straightened her posture and approached them cautiously. When she reached out to touch the girl's cheek, Jason noticed how her hands shook. "What happened here?" he asked, glancing back at the wreckage. "Who was flying this thing?" The woman hesitated, her gaze flickering toward the remains of the shuttle. "We were traveling," she said finally. "Just me and my daughter. Something went wrong with the controls, and we lost altitude. I don't know how much longer we would have lasted." Jason nodded, though he sensed she wasn't telling him everything. There was something guarded about her tone, something wary, in the way she avoided meeting his eyes. He decided not to press her, not yet. Anyway, they had bigger problems to deal with. "We need to get out of here," he said, adjusting his grip on the girl. "This place isn't safe, especially with a storm rolling in. Do you think you can walk?" The woman nodded, though her legs wobbled unsteadily as she took her first steps. Jason kept a close eye on her, ready to catch her if she fell. Together, they began the long trek back to his camp, the jungle closing in around them like a living thing. The journey was slow and grueling. Every step seemed to take twice as long as it should, and the rain started before they were halfway there. By the time they reached the clearing where Jason's makeshift shelter stood, all three of them were drenched and shivering. Jason ushered the woman and her daughter inside, spreading blankets across the floor to dry them off. Once they were settled, he lit a small fire and handed the woman a thermos of warm tea. She accepted it gratefully, wrapping her hands around the cup as if drawing strength from its warmth. "I'm Claire," she said after a while, her voice softer now, "and this is Lily." She gestured to the girl, who had fallen asleep against her shoulder. "Jason," he replied, nodding. "You're lucky I was nearby. Another hour, and you might not have made it." Claire's expression darkened, and she looked away. "Luck doesn't feel like the right word," she murmured. "Not after everything." Jason wanted to ask what she meant, but he could tell she wasn't ready to talk about it. Instead, he focused on tending to their injuries, cleaning the cuts on Claire's arms and checking Lily for any signs of serious harm. As he worked, he couldn't shake the feeling that these two were running from something far bigger than a crashed shuttle. Whatever it was, it had left its mark on both of them. When the fire began to die down, Jason leaned back against the wall of the shelter, watching the steady rise and fall of Lily's chest. For the first time in years, he felt a sense of purpose, a reason to stay put, at least for a little while. These strangers needed him, and for reasons he couldn't quite explain, that mattered more than anything else. Outside, the storm raged on, but inside the tiny shelter, there was a fragile kind of peace. Jason closed his eyes, letting the sound of the rain lull him into a restless sleep. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but for now, they were safe. And sometimes, that was enough. Document Part 2. The morning came slowly, the storm having passed, but leaving behind a thick mist that clung to the jungle like a damp blanket. Jason woke up first, his body stiffed from sleeping on the hard ground. He stretched quietly, careful not to disturb Claire and Lily, who were still curled up together under the pile of blankets. The fire had burned down to embers during the night, and the air inside the shelter was cool and damp. Jason stepped outside, taking a deep breath of the fresh, wet air. The jungle looked different in the daylight, less menacing, more alive. Birds chirped loudly overhead, and droplets of water dripped steadily from the leaves. He glanced back at the shelter, feeling a strange sense of responsibility for the two people inside. They weren't just strangers anymore. They were his guests, and he owed it to them to keep them safe. After gathering some dry wood, Jason rebuilt the fire and set about making breakfast. He didn't have much food, just some dried rations and a few packets of instant coffee, but it would do. As the smell of cooking wafted through the air, Claire stirred awake. She blinked against the light filtering into the shelter, her green eyes meeting Jason's as she sat up. "Good morning," Jason said, offering her a small smile. "I made some coffee. It's not great, but it'll warm you up." Claire nodded, accepting the cup he handed her. She sipped it slowly, her gaze drifting toward Lily, who was still fast asleep. For a moment, she seemed lost in thought, her expression unreadable. Then she turned back to Jason. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for everything. You didn't have to help us." Jason shrugged, brushing off her gratitude. "Anyone would have done the same." Claire shook her head. "No, they wouldn't. Most people would have kept walking." Her words hung in the air, between them, heavy with meaning. Jason didn't respond immediately, unsure of what to say. Instead, he busied himself with stirring the pot of stew he'd prepared, trying to ignore the way her eyes lingered on him. There was something about Claire's quiet strength mixed with vulnerability that intrigued him. She wasn't like anyone he'd ever met before. As the morning wore on, Lily finally woke up, rubbing her eyes and yawning. When she saw Jason, she gave him a shy smile, clutching her stuffed animal close to her chest. Jason knelt down so he was eye level with her. "Hey there, sleepyhead," he said gently. "How are you feeling?" Lily hesitated, glancing at her mother for reassurance. Claire gave her an encouraging nod, and Lily finally spoke, her voice soft but steady. "My leg hurts." "I bet it does," Jason replied, reaching out to examine the bruise on her shin. "But you're tough, aren't you?" "I think you'll be just fine." Lily smiled again, this time a little brighter. "You saved us." Jason chuckled, scratching the back of his neck awkwardly. "Well, I couldn't let you crash and burn out there, could I?" The three of them ate breakfast together, sharing the simple meal in companionable silence. Afterward, Claire helped Jason clean up, while Lily played nearby, her laughter echoing through the clearing. It felt almost normal, like they were a family enjoying a peaceful day in the wilderness. But Jason knew better. Something dark loomed over them, something Claire hadn't fully explained yet. That afternoon, as the sun climbed higher in the sky, Jason decided to ask her about it. He found her sitting by the edge of the clearing, staring off into the distance. Her arms were wrapped around her knees, and her face was troubled. "Mind if I join you?" Jason asked, gesturing to the spot beside her. Claire shook her head, scooting over slightly to make room for him. They sat in silence for a while, listening to the sounds of the jungle. Finally, Jason broke the quiet. "You don't have to tell me anything if you don't want to," he began, choosing his words carefully. "But I get the feeling there's more to your story than a busted shuttle." Claire sighed, her shoulders slumping. "You're right," she admitted. "There's more, a lot more." She paused, as if gathering her thoughts. Jason waited, patiently, sensing that she needed time to decide how much to share. When she finally spoke, her voice was low and measured. "We weren't just traveling for fun," she said. "We were running from people who wanted to hurt us." Jason frowned, his instincts kicking in. "Who's after you?" Claire hesitated again, her fingers twisting nervously in her lap. "It's complicated. Let's just say, Lily isn't exactly ordinary, and there are people who know that. People who will stop at nothing to find her." Jason's mind raced, piecing together what little information she'd given him. Whatever secret Claire was carrying, it was big enough to put both her and her daughter in danger. He leaned forward, his tone serious. "Claire, if someone's coming for you, I need to know. I can't protect you if I don't understand what we're up against." She looked at him then, really looked at him, as if weighing whether or not to trust him. Finally, she nodded, her resolve strengthening. "Okay," she said, "but promise me you won't freak out." Jason raised an eyebrow, but nodded anyway. "I promise." Claire took a deep breath, steeling herself. "Lily, she's part of an experimental program. Back on Earth, she was diagnosed with a terminal illness when she was 5. We were told there was no hope, no cure. But then we heard about this trial, a cutting-edge treatment using alien DNA to repair damaged cells. It worked. It saved her life." Jason stared at her, processing what she'd just said. Alien DNA, experimental treatments. It sounded like something out of a science fiction movie, not real life. But one look at Claire's face told him she wasn't lying. "So why are you running?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Because the company that funded the trial, they're not interested in saving lives," Claire explained bitterly. "They're interested in profit. Once they realized what Lily could do, what her modified DNA was capable of, they started treating her like a lab rat. Tests, experiments, constant monitoring. It was hell. So we ran. We've been hiding ever since." Jason exhaled sharply, running a hand through his hair. This was worse than he'd imagined. If what Claire said was true, they weren't dealing with ordinary criminals, they were dealing with a powerful corporation with resources and reach far beyond anything he'd faced before. And now they're looking for you," he concluded grimly. "Yes," Claire confirmed, her voice trembling, "and they won't stop until they find us." For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The weight of Claire's confession settled over them like a shadow. Jason knew what he had to do, even if it meant putting himself in harm's way. "We'll figure this out," he said firmly, meeting her gaze. Together, Claire blinked, surprise flickering across her face. "Why are you doing this? Why risk your life for us?" Jason shrugged, a small smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. "Maybe because it's the right thing to do. Or maybe because I see a mom fighting for her kid, and that's something I can respect." Claire's eyes filled with tears, though. She quickly wiped them away. "You barely know us," she whispered. "And yet here you are, ready to fight for us." "Sometimes," Jason replied softly, "that's all it takes. Knowing someone needs help." They sat there for a while longer, the jungle humming around them. Slowly, Claire's tension began to ease, replaced by a fragile sense of hope. For the first time in months, she allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, they might actually stand a chance. Later that evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Jason cooked another meal over the fire. Lily joined them, her earlier shyness replaced by curiosity. She peppered Jason with questions about his work, his travels, and the jungle itself. He answered patiently, amused by her enthusiasm. "Do you live here all by yourself?" Lily asked, tilting her head. "Pretty much," Jason replied. "It's quieter this way. No one to boss me around." Lily giggled, covering her mouth with her hands. "Does that mean you're the boss?" "I guess you could say that," Jason said with a wink. "But only when I'm fixing things. Otherwise, I'm just a guy trying to stay out of trouble." Claire watched the exchange with a faint smile, her heart swelling with gratitude. She'd spent so long shielding Lily from the world, afraid of what might happen if anyone got too close. But watching her daughter interact with Jason, seeing the warmth and kindness in his eyes, she realized that maybe letting someone in wasn't such a bad idea after all. As the fire crackled softly, casting flickering shadows across their faces, Claire felt a spark of something she hadn't felt in years: hope. Whatever lay ahead, they would face it together. And for the first time in a long time, she didn't feel quite so alone. Document Part 3. The next morning dawned clear and bright, the jungle bathed in golden sunlight. Jason woke early, his mind still heavy with the weight of Claire's confession from the night before. He couldn't shake the image of Lily's wide, innocent eyes and her laughter that seemed to light up the entire clearing. She was just a child, yet she carried the burden of being something extraordinary, something dangerous in the wrong hands. Jason stepped outside the shelter, stretching his arms as he scanned the horizon. The jungle looked peaceful enough, but he knew appearances could be deceiving. If Claire was right, and he had no reason to doubt her, they weren't safe here, not for long anyway. He needed to come up with a plan, something that would give them a fighting chance against whoever might be hunting them. As he gathered firewood, Jason noticed Claire emerged from the shelter, her face pale but determined. She carried a small bag slung over her shoulder, its contents jingling softly with each step. When she reached him, she held out the bag without a word. Inside were a few vials of liquid, their contents glowing faintly in the morning light. "What's this?" Jason asked, frowning as he examined one of the vials. "It's Lily's medication," Claire explained, her voice tight with worry. "She needs it every day. Without it, her body starts to reject the alien DNA. It's complicated." Jason nodded slowly, tucking the bag carefully into his pocket. "How much do you have left?" "Enough for a week," Claire admitted. "Maybe less if we can't find more." Jason's stomach sank. They were running out of time, and they didn't even have a solid plan yet. He glanced back at the shelter, where Lily was playing quietly with her stuffed animal. She seemed so carefree, oblivious to the danger lurking just beyond the trees. "We'll figure it out," Jason said firmly, trying to reassure both Claire and himself. "First things first, we need to fix your shuttle. Or at least, get it working well enough to take you somewhere safer." Claire hesitated, biting her lip. "Jason, I don't think we should go back to the crash site. What if they're already there? What if they've found us?" He understood her fear, but staying put wasn't an option either. "We don't have much choice," he said gently. "If we leave the shuttle, we're stuck here. And trust me, this place isn't exactly paradise. We'll be careful. I'll scope it out first. If anything looks suspicious, we'll turn around and try something else." Claire sighed, reluctantly nodding. "Okay, but promise me you'll be careful." "I will," Jason replied, giving her a reassuring smile. "I'm not going anywhere." By mid-morning, they set off toward the crash site, moving cautiously through the dense undergrowth. Jason led the way, his machete slicing through thick vines and branches. Claire followed close behind, holding Lily's hand tightly. Every sound of rustle of leaves, the distant call of a bird made her flinch, her grip on Lily's hand tightening reflexively. When they finally reached the wreckage, Jason signaled for them to stay back while he scouted ahead. The scene was eerily quiet, the charred remains of the shuttle standing like a skeletal monument in the middle of the clearing. Jason circled the area slowly, his eyes scanning for any signs of movement or tampering. To his relief, there was no evidence that anyone had been there since the crash. "It's clear," he called out softly, waving Claire and Lily forward. Together, they began salvaging what they could from the wreckage. Claire focused on retrieving medical supplies and personal belongings, while Jason worked on assessing the damage to the shuttle itself. The engine was badly damaged, its components fused together by the heat of the crash. Repairing it would be nearly impossible without the right tools, or a miracle. As Jason pried open a panel to examine the wiring, something caught his eye. Nestled among the debris was a small device, its screen cracked, but still functional. It looked like some kind of tracking beacon, its blinking light pulsing steadily. His heart sank as realization hit him. "Claire," he said sharply, holding up the device, "do you know what this is?" Claire's face went pale as she recognized it. It's a tracker. They must have planted it before we left Earth." Jason cursed under his breath, tossing the device to the ground and crushing it beneath his boot. "So much for lying low," he muttered. "If they were tracking you, they'll know exactly where we are." Claire sank to her knees, her hands trembling. "What do we do now?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. Jason knelt beside her, placing a steadying hand on her shoulder. "We move. Fast. Grab whatever you can carry, and let's get out of here." They worked quickly, stuffing backpacks with food, water, and supplies. Lily clung to her mother, her wide eyes filled with confusion. "Mommy, what's happening?" she asked, her voice quivering. Claire forced a smile, brushing a strand of hair from her daughter's face. "Nothing to worry about, sweetheart. We're just going on a little adventure, okay? Stick close to me, and everything will be fine." Once they had everything they could carry, Jason led them deeper into the jungle, away from the crash site. He chose a path that twisted and turned, hoping to throw off anyone who might follow them. The terrain grew rougher as they ventured further, forcing them to climb over fallen logs and wade through shallow streams. By late afternoon, exhaustion had set in, and they stopped to rest in a secluded grove. While Claire tended to Lily, Jason climbed a nearby tree to get a better view of their surroundings. From his perch, he could see miles of dense jungle stretching in every direction. There was no sign of pursuit, at least not yet, but that didn't mean they were safe. Whoever was after them would be persistent, relentless. They couldn't afford to let their guard down, not even for a moment. As the sun began to set, Jason rejoined Claire and Lily by the fire. Claire had managed to cook a simple meal using some of the supplies they'd salvaged, though none of them had much of an appetite. The mood was somber, the reality of their situation settling in like a heavy fog. "This isn't fair," Claire said suddenly, her voice breaking. "Lily didn't ask for any of this. She's just a kid." Jason reached out, placing a comforting hand on hers. "You're doing everything you can to protect her," he said softly. "That's all anyone can ask of you." Claire shook her head, tears streaming down her face. "But is it enough? Am I enough?" "You are," Jason insisted, his tone firm. "Look at how far you've come. Look at how strong you've been. You're giving Lily a chance to live a normal life, even if it means running. That's more than most people would do." Claire met his gaze, her eyes searching his face for reassurance. Slowly, her expression softened, and she gave him a small, grateful smile. "Thank you," she murmured, "for believing in me. For believing in me." "Us." Jason shrugged, embarrassed by her gratitude. "Like I said before, it's the right thing to do." As the fire crackled softly between them, Lily curled up in her mother's lap, yawning sleepily. Claire stroked her hair, humming a gentle tune to lull her to sleep. Watching them, Jason felt a pang of something he hadn't felt in years, a longing for connection, for family. These two strangers had become more than just people he was helping. They had become a part of him, whether he realized it or not. Later that night, as Claire and Lily slept, Jason kept watch, his thoughts drifting to the road ahead. He didn't know what the future held, but one thing was certain: he wouldn't abandon them. Not now, not ever. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together as a team, as a family. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough to keep them alive. Document. Part 4. The jungle was quiet that night. The kind of silence that felt unnatural, as if the world itself was holding its breath. Jason sat by the fire, his eyes scanning the darkness beyond the flickering flames. Claire and Lily were asleep, their breathing steady and soft. He couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched, though he saw no movement, heard no sound. It was a gut instinct one he'd learned to trust over the years. He shifted uncomfortably, adjusting, the rifle slung across his lap. The weapon wasn't much, but it was better than nothing. If anyone came for them in the dead of night, he wanted to be ready. Still, the thought of facing an entire team of corporate hunters made his stomach churn. They weren't amateurs, they were professionals, trained to track and capture a kill. And Jason knew he wasn't exactly equipped to take them on. As the hours dragged on, exhaustion began to creep in. His eyelids grew heavy, and his thoughts started to blur. But just as he was about to give in to sleep, a faint buzzing noise reached his ears. At first, he thought it might be an insect, but then it grew louder, more mechanical. His heart skipped a beat as he realized what it was: a drone. "Claire," Jason hissed, shaking her awake. "Wake up." Claire bolted upright, her green eyes wide with fear. "What is it?" "They're here," Jason whispered urgently, pointing toward the sky. Sure enough, a small, sleek drone hovered above the treetops, its red lights blinking ominously. It scanned the area methodically, its cameras sweeping over the clearing where they were camped. "We need to move now." Jason grabbed their bags, tossing one to Claire. She woke Lily gently, whispering reassurances as she helped her daughter to her feet. Together they slipped into the shadows, moving as quietly as possible. The jungle swallowed them whole, its thick canopy blocking out the moonlight. Jason led the way, his machete cutting through the dense undergrowth. Every step seemed to echo, louder than the last, each snap of a twig or rustle of leaves threatening to give away their position. Behind him, Claire held Lily's hand tightly, her own grip trembling. "Keep moving," Jason urged, glancing over his shoulder. The drone's buzzing grew louder, closer. It was following them. They pressed on, their pace quickening as panic set in. Jason's mind raced, trying to come up with a plan. They couldn't outrun the drone. Forever. It was only a matter of time before it pinpointed their location. He needed to find a way to lose it, to throw it off their trail. Up ahead, he spotted a narrow ravine, its steep walls covered in vines and moss. Without hesitation, he motioned for Claire and Lily to follow him down into the crevice. The descent was treacherous, the ground slick with moisture, but they managed to reach the bottom without injury. Jason quickly instructed them to stay low and silent. The drone hovered above the ravine, its cameras scanning the area. For a moment, Jason held his breath, praying it wouldn't spot them. Then, just as suddenly as it had appeared, the buzzing faded, and the drone moved on. Disappearing into the night, Claire let out a shaky sigh of relief, sinking to the ground with Lily in her arms. "That was too close," she murmured, her voice barely audible. Jason nodded, wiping sweat from his forehead. "We can't stay here. They'll send more drones and, maybe people soon. We need to keep moving." Claire hesitated, looking at Lily, who was pale and clearly frightened. "She's tired, Jason. We all are. We can't keep running like this." "I know," Jason admitted, his tone softening. "But we don't have a choice. Not yet. We'll rest when we're sure. We've lost them." Reluctantly, Claire agreed, and they continued their journey through the ravine. The narrow passage twisted and turned, forcing them to navigate carefully. At times, the walls closed in so tightly that they had to squeeze through sideways. But despite the challenges, the ravine offered them some protection from the drones. At least out by dawn, they emerged into a new clearing, this one smaller and more secluded than the last. Jason signaled for them to stop, dropping his bag with a weary sigh. "Let's make camp here," he said, his voice rough with fatigue. "We'll rest for a few hours, then figure out our next move." Claire nodded gratefully, setting Lily down on a patch of soft grass. The little girl curled up almost immediately, her body finally giving in to exhaustion. Claire wrapped a blanket around her, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "She's strong," Jason said quietly, watching the two of them. "Both of you are." Claire smiled faintly, though her eyes were heavy with worry. "I hope so. I don't know how much longer I can keep doing this, Jason. Running, hiding. It's not a life. It won't always be like this," Jason promised, though he wasn't entirely sure it was true. "We'll find a way to end this, to keep Lily safe." Claire looked at him, her expression softening. "Why are you doing this, Jason? Really? You could walk away, leave us to fend for ourselves. No one would blame you." Jason hesitated, his gaze drifting to the fire he'd just started. "Because someone has to stand up for what's right," he said finally. "Because Lily deserves a chance to live a normal life. And because—" he trailed off, unsure how to finish. "Because what?" Claire prompted, her voice gentle. "Because I care," Jason admitted, his cheeks flushing slightly. "About both of you. More than I probably should." Claire's breath caught in her throat, and for a moment, neither of them spoke. Then, slowly, she reached out, placing her hand over his. "Thank you," she whispered, "for everything." The warmth of her touch sent a shiver down Jason's spine. He hadn't expected to feel this way, not about anyone. But there was something about Claire, something about the way she fought for her daughter, that stirred something deep inside him. It was more than gratitude. It was admiration, respect, maybe even something stronger. As the sun rose higher in the sky, casting golden light over the clearing, they allowed themselves a brief moment of peace. Claire leaned back against a tree, closing her eyes as she listened to the sounds of the jungle. Jason sat beside her, keeping watch but feeling strangely content. For the first time in days, they weren't running. They weren't hiding. They were simply together. But the reprieve was short-lived. By mid-morning, the distant hum of engines shattered the tranquility. Jason sprang to his feet, his heart pounding. "They're coming," he said grimly. "On foot this time." Claire's face went pale, but she didn't hesitate. She scooped Lily into her arms, waking her with a gentle shake. "We have to go," she whispered urgently. Jason grabbed their bags, leading them deeper into the jungle. This time, they didn't stop, didn't slow down. The hunters were close now, their shouts echoing through the trees. Jason could hear the crunch of boots on dry leaves, the occasional crack of a branch. They were being herded, pushed toward something, but what? Ahead, the jungle opened up into a wide riverbank. The water flowed swiftly, its surface glittering in the sunlight. Jason skidded to a halt, his mind racing. Crossing the river would slow them down, but staying put meant certain capture. There was no other option. "We'll cross here," he said, pointing to a shallow section of the river. "Stay close, and don't let go of Lily." Claire nodded, gripping her daughter's hand tightly. Together, they waded into the icy water, the current pulling at their legs. Lily whimpered, clinging to her mother, but Claire kept moving, her focus unwavering. When they reached the other side, Jason helped them climb onto the bank, his muscles burning with exertion. "Keep going," he urged, urging them forward. "We need to put as much distance between us and them as possible." Behind them, the shouts grew louder, closer. Jason glanced back, his jaw tightening. The hunters were at the edge of the river now, preparing to cross. He knew they couldn't outrun them forever, but he also knew he couldn't let them catch up. With a determined look, Jason turned to Claire. "Go," he said firmly. "Take Lily and keep moving. I'll hold them off." Claire shook her head, tears welling in her eyes. "No, I'm not leaving you." "You have to," Jason insisted, his voice soft but firm. "Lily needs you. She needs her mom. Trust me, I'll catch up." For a long moment, Claire hesitated, torn between her instincts and her faith in Jason. Finally, she nodded, her lips trembling. "Be careful," she whispered, hugging Lily close. "I will," Jason promised, giving her a reassuring smile. "Now go." As Claire and Lily disappeared into the jungle, Jason turned back to face the river. The hunters were halfway across, now, their weapons drawn. He took a deep breath, steadying himself. Whatever happened next, he wasn't going to let them win, not without a fight. Document Part 5. Jason stood at the edge of the riverbank, his rifle gripped tightly in his hands. The hunters were closing in, their boots splashing through the shallow water as they crossed the river. He counted 5 of them armed, organized, and clearly not here to negotiate. Jason's heart pounded in his chest, but he forced himself to stay calm. If he panicked now, it would all be over. He glanced back toward the jungle, where Claire and Lily had disappeared, hoping they were far enough ahead to stay safe. He couldn't afford to think about them anymore, not if he wanted to focus on what came next. His job was simple: buy them time. Whether that meant scaring off the hunters or holding them off completely, he didn't know yet. All he knew was that he wasn't going down without a fight. As the first hunter stepped onto the bank, Jason raised his rifle, aiming carefully. "Stop right there," he called out, his voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through him. "You don't want to come any closer." The lead hunter paused, raising his hand slightly in mock surrender. "Easy there, friend," he said with a smirk. "We're just looking for someone, a mother and her little girl. Seen them around?" Jason didn't respond, his finger hovering over the trigger. "Turn around and leave, now." The man chuckled, shaking his head. "You really think you can stop us? You're outnumbered, pal. Just step aside, and we'll forget this ever happened." Jason's jaw tightened. These people weren't here to reason. They were here to take what they wanted by force, and he wasn't about to let that happen. Without warning, he fired a shot into the air, the sharp crack echoing through the jungle. Birds scattered from the trees, their cries adding to the chaos. The hunters ducked instinctively, their smirks fading into expressions of anger. "All right, tough guy," the leader growled, signaling for his team to spread out. "Have it your way." Jason didn't wait for them to make the first move. He fired another shot, this time aiming low to hit the ground near the leader's feet. The man stumbled back, cursing loudly as dirt and debris flew into the air. It was enough to slow them down, giving Jason a chance to retreat further into the jungle. He moved quickly, weaving between trees and using the dense foliage as cover. Behind him, the hunters regrouped, shouting orders as they gave chase. Jason could hear their voices growing louder, their footsteps crashing through the underbrush. They weren't subtle, they didn't need to be. They had numbers on their side, and they knew it. But Jason had something they didn't: knowledge of the terrain. He'd spent weeks exploring this part of the jungle, learning its twists and turns, its hidden dangers. As he sprinted through the trees, he led them toward a narrow ravine he'd discovered earlier, dead end, with steep walls, and only one way out. If he could trap them there, he might stand a chance. Reaching the ravine, Jason slid down the slope, landing hard on the rocky ground below. He winced as pain shot through his ankle, but he pushed it aside, focusing on the task at hand. Quickly, he set up a makeshift barricade using fallen branches and rocks, creating a barrier that would slow the hunters down when they arrived. Moments later, the sound of footsteps echoed above him. The hunters appeared at the edge of the ravine, peering down at him with narrowed eyes. "You've got nowhere to run," the leader shouted, his tone dripping with amusement. "Give up now, and maybe we'll let you live." Jason ignored him, his mind racing. He needed a distraction, something to throw them off balance long enough for him to make his move. Then he remembered the grenades strapped to his belt, explosives he'd salvaged from an old supply crate during one of his earlier scavenging trips. They weren't much, but they'd do. Pulling one of the grenades free, Jason pulled the pin and hurled it toward the far end of the ravine. The explosion rocked the area, sending a cascade of rocks and debris tumbling down the walls. Dust filled the air, choking visibility and forcing the hunters to scramble for cover. Seizing the opportunity, Jason climbed higher, using the confusion to slip past them unnoticed. His ankle throbbed with every step, but he gritted his teeth and kept moving. He couldn't afford to stop, not until he was sure he'd lost them by the time he reached the jungle again. The hunters were far behind, their shouts fading into the distance. Jason collapsed against a tree, breathing heavily as he tried to catch his breath. His body ached, and his ankle was swollen, but he was alive and, more importantly, he'd bought Claire and Lily some time. For a moment, he allowed himself to rest, leaning his head back against the rough bark. The jungle was eerily quiet now, the earlier chaos replaced by an almost unnatural stillness. Jason closed his eyes, listening to the faint rustle of leaves overhead. He thought about Claire and Lily, wondering how far they'd gotten, whether they were safe. He hoped they'd found somewhere to hide, somewhere the hunters wouldn't think to look. After a few minutes, Jason forced himself to stand, testing his weight on his injured ankle. It hurt, but it wasn't broken, at least, not completely. He could walk, albeit slowly. That was good enough for now. Retracing his steps, Jason followed the path Claire and Lily had taken, keeping an eye out for any signs of their passage. He found footprints in the soft earth, broken branches, and even a scrap of fabric caught on a thorny vine. They were close, he could feel it. Finally, he spotted them huddled beneath a cluster of large ferns, their faces pale with fear. Claire held Lily tightly, her body shielding her daughter from view. When she saw Jason approaching, her eyes widened with relief. "You're okay," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. I thought they'd caught you." "I'm fine," Jason assured her, though his battered appearance suggested otherwise. "They won't follow us for now anyway. We need to keep moving." Claire nodded, helping Lily to her feet. The little girl clung to her mother, her wide eyes searching Jason's face. "You saved us again," she said softly. Jason smiled, ruffling her hair gently. "That's kind of my job these days." Despite his attempt at humor, the weight of the situation hung heavy in the air. They were still being hunted, still running for their lives. But for now, They were together and that mattered more than anything else as they continued their journey. Jason limped along beside them, his ankle throbbing with every step. Claire noticed and slowed her pace, matching his stride. "Let me help you," she said, offering her shoulder for support. Jason hesitated, unused to accepting help from anyone, but he nodded gratefully, leaning on her as they walked. "Thanks," he muttered, his voice barely audible. They traveled like that for hours, moving deeper into the jungle until they reached a hidden cave Jason had discovered during one of his earlier explorations. It was small, but dry, with enough space for all three of them to rest comfortably. Jason helped Claire and Lily settle inside before collapsing onto the cool stone floor, his body finally giving in to exhaustion. Claire knelt beside him, examining his ankle with careful hands. "It's swollen," she observed, her brow furrowed with concern. "Does it hurt badly?" "It's fine," Jason insisted, though his grimace betrayed him. "Just twisted it a bit." Claire shook her head, pulling a roll of bandages from her bag. "Don't argue with me. Let me take care of it." Jason didn't protest as she wrapped his ankle tightly, her touch surprisingly gentle. For a moment, he forgot about the hunters, the danger, everything except the warmth of her hands and the kindness in her eyes. When she finished, Claire sat back, meeting his gaze. "Thank you," she said softly, "for staying behind, for risking your life for us." Jason shrugged, embarrassed by her gratitude. "It's what anyone would have done." "No," Claire replied firmly. "Not everyone would. You're different, Jason. You're brave and selfless." And she trailed off, her cheeks flushing slightly. "And what?" Jason prompted, his voice barely above a whisper. "And I don't know what I'd do without you," Claire admitted, her green eyes shining with emotion. Jason felt his heart skip a beat, though he tried to play it cool. "Well, lucky for you, I'm not going anywhere." Claire smiled, her expression softening. "Good," she murmured, "because I don't want you to." For a long moment, neither of them spoke, the silence between them charged with unspoken feelings. Then Lily stirred, breaking the spell. "Are we safe now?" she asked sleepily, rubbing her eyes. "We will be," Claire promised, pulling her daughter close, "as long as we stick together." Jason nodded, his gaze drifting to the entrance of the cave. Outside, the jungle stretched endlessly, its shadows hiding both danger and hope. Whatever lay ahead, they would face it together as a family, and, for the first time in a long time, Jason felt like he truly belonged. Document Part 6. The cave offered a fragile sense of safety, but it wasn't enough to quiet Claire's restless mind. She sat near the entrance, her knees pulled up to her chest as she watched the jungle beyond. The sun was setting now, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink, but Claire barely noticed. Her thoughts were consumed by what had happened, and what might happen next. Jason lay on the floor a few feet away, his injured ankle propped up on a makeshift pillow of leaves and cloth. He'd tried to stay awake, to keep watch in case the hunters returned, but exhaustion had finally caught up with him. His breathing was slow and steady, his face relaxed in sleep. Claire found herself glancing at him often, her heart swelling with gratitude, and something else she couldn't quite name. Lily was curled up beside Jason, her small body rising and falling with each breath. She'd fallen asleep almost immediately after they'd settled into the cave, her energy spent from the long day of running and hiding. Claire smiled faintly as she watched her daughter, marveling at how resilient she was despite everything they'd been through. But the peace was fleeting. Claire knew they couldn't stay in the cave forever. Sooner or later, the hunters would find them more worse. They'd run out of food, water, or Lily's medication. Every second they stayed put felt like borrowing time they didn't have. Her thoughts drifted back to Jason. She owed him so much, her life, her daughter's life, but it wasn't just gratitude she felt anymore. It was admiration, respect, and maybe even affection. She shook her head, trying to push the thought away. This wasn't the time or place for such feelings. They were running for their lives, and there was no room for distractions. Still, she couldn't deny the warmth that spread through her chest whenever he looked at her, the way his voice softened when he spoke to Lily, the way he'd risked everything to protect them. He wasn't just a stranger who'd stumbled into their lives. He was someone who cared deeply, someone who fought for what was right. And in a world that seemed determined to tear them apart, that meant more than words could express. As the hours passed, Claire debated whether to wake Jason. He needed rest, but she also knew they couldn't afford to waste any more time. Finally, she reached out, gently shaking his shoulder. "Jason," she whispered, "wake up." He stirred groggily, blinking as he adjusted to the dim light. "What is it?" he asked, his voice rough with sleep. "We need to talk," Claire said softly, glancing toward Lily to make sure she was still asleep. "About what happens next." Jason sat up slowly, wincing as he shifted his injured ankle. "All right," he said, rubbing his eyes. "What's on your mind?" Claire hesitated, choosing her words carefully. "We can't keep running like this. Sooner or later, they'll catch us or we'll run out of supplies. We need a plan, a real one." Jason nodded, his expression serious. "I've been thinking about that. There's an old rebel base not far from here at least. I think it's still there. It's abandoned now, but if we can reach it, we might be able to use it as a safe haven, at least for a little while." Claire's eyes widened. "Rebels? You mean anti-corporate fighters?" "Yeah," Jason replied. "They used to operate in this region before the corporations cracked down on them. If anyone knows how to fight, these guys, it's them." Claire bit her lip, weighing the risks. Trusting strangers even rebels was dangerous, but staying on the run was riskier. "Do you think they'll help us?" she asked finally. "I don't know," Jason admitted, "but it's worth a shot. They hate the corporations as much as we do. Maybe they'll see us as allies." Claire nodded slowly, her resolve strengthening. "Okay, let's do it. But we'll need to move fast." Jason agreed, though his gaze lingered on her face. "Are you sure about this? It's not going to be easy." "I'm sure," Claire said firmly. "We can't keep living like this. We need a chance, a real chance to fight back." Jason smiled faintly, his admiration for her shining in his eyes. "You're stronger than you give yourself credit for. You know that?" Claire looked away, her cheeks flushing slightly. "I'm not strong. I'm just doing what I have to do." "You're wrong," Jason said softly. "Strength isn't about never being afraid. It's about facing your fears anyway. And you've done that every single day for Lily." Claire's throat tightened, and she blinked back tears. "I just want her to be safe," she whispered, "to grow up without having to look over her shoulder all the time." "She will," Jason promised. "I won't let anything happen to her, or to you." The sincerity in his voice made Claire's heart ache. She wanted to believe him, to trust that things would somehow work out. But part of her, the part that had spent years running, hiding, fighting, knew better. Life didn't hand out happy endings easily. Still, for the first time in a long time, she allowed herself to hope. By the time morning came, they were ready to move. Jason fashioned a crude crutch from a sturdy branch, using it to support his weight as they navigated the jungle. Claire carried Lily on her back, the little girl clinging tightly to her mother's shoulders. Together, they followed Jason's lead, pushing deeper into the wilderness. The journey was grueling, the terrain uneven and treacherous. Jason's ankle throbbed with every step, but he refused to slow down. Claire kept pace beside him, her determination unwavering. Even Lily remained quiet, sensing the gravity of their situation as they traveled. Jason shared stories of the rebels he'd heard about, how they'd fought against corporate greed, how they'd protected innocent people from exploitation. Claire listened intently, her curiosity piqued. She'd always believed the corporations were untouchable, invincible. Hearing that others had dared to stand against them gave her a glimmer of hope. By midday, they reached the edge of a dense forest. Beyond it, Jason explained, lay the ruins of the rebel base. It's not far now, he said, his voice tinged with cautious optimism. Just a little further. Claire nodded, scanning the horizon for any signs of danger. The jungle was eerily quiet, the usual sounds of birds and insects replaced by an unsettling stillness. She glanced at Jason, her unease growing. "Do you feel that?" she asked softly. Jason frowned, his grip tightening on the crutch. "Yeah, something's off." Before they could react, a rustling sound erupted from the trees ahead. Shadows moved among the foliage, too deliberate to belong to animals. Jason raised his rifle, motioning for Claire and Lily to stay behind him. "Stay close," he whispered. A figure emerged from the underbrush, a man, clad in tattered camouflage, his weapon slung across his chest. He held up his hands, signaling that he meant no harm. "Easy," he said, his voice calm but firm. "We're not here to hurt you." Jason hesitated, his finger hovering over the trigger. "Who are you?" he demanded. "The name's Riley," the man replied. "I'm with the Resistance. We've been tracking those hunters for days. Figured you might need some help." Claire exchanged a glance with Jason, uncertainty written across her face. Could they trust him, or was this another trap? "How do we know you're telling the truth?" Jason asked, his tone skeptical. Riley smirked, gesturing to the forest behind him. "You don't. But if we wanted you dead, you'd already be lying in a ditch. Now, are you coming with us, or not?" Jason looked at Claire, silently asking for her input. She hesitated, then nodded. "Let's go," she said quietly. "We don't have a choice." With caution, they followed Riley into the forest, where a group of rebels waited. They were a motley crew, their clothes patched and worn, their faces hardened by years of struggle. But there was kindness in their eyes, a shared sense of purpose that reassured Claire. At the center of the group stood a woman with sharp features and piercing blue eyes. She introduced herself as Mara, the leader of the Resistance. "Welcome," she said, her voice steady. "You're safe here for now." Claire exhaled a shaky breath, relief washing over her. For the first time in months, she felt a flicker of safety, however fleeting it might be. That night, as they rested in the rebels' camp, Claire found herself sitting beside Jason near the fire. The flames danced between them, casting flickering shadows across his face. She studied him quietly, marveling at how much he'd done for her and Lily. Without him, they wouldn't have made it this far. "You should get some rest," Jason said, breaking the silence. "You've earned it." "So, should you?" Claire replied, her voice soft. "You've done more than enough for us." Jason shrugged, brushing off her gratitude. "I told you I'm not going anywhere." Claire smiled faintly, her heart skipping a beat. "Good," she murmured. "Because I don't want you to." Jason met her gaze, his expression softening. For a moment, neither of them spoke, the crackling fire filling the space between them. Then Claire leaned closer, her voice barely audible. "Thank you, Jason, for everything." "You don't have to thank me," he said gently. "Not for this." Claire shook her head, her green eyes glistening with emotion. "Yes, I do. Because I don't know what I'd do without you." Jason's breath caught in his throat, his heart pounding in his chest. He wanted to say something, anything, but the words eluded him. Instead, he reached out, taking her hand in his. It was a simple gesture, but it spoke volumes. For the first time since they'd met, Claire felt like she wasn't alone. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together as a family. And for now, that was enough.